Man, I really need to get a remote shutter. I have to get up, turn the camera on every time. I need a button from like over here. Hi guys, welcome back. In today's episode of Crue Trime. What was that? Crue Trime? Crue Trime, Crue Trime, Crue Trime, Crue Trime. This one is pretty current. It's actually had some updates in recent days, so it's very fresh. This is the story of Mollie Tibbetts. Before we get too far into the story, let's talk to future me about today's sponsor. Today's episode is sponsored by Ana Luisa. September is Sustainability Month, and Ana Luisa is committed to sustainability. All of their items are made from small batch recycled materials. The entire operation, from sourcing the materials to manufacturing to distributing, it's certified climate neutral. Yes, I said climate neutral because it is carbon neutral and water neutral. This jewelry is made with love for the earth and love for quality, sustainable pieces that you can feel good about wearing. And today I'm featuring all items that are made with hypoallergenic sterling silver. First up is one of my favorites, and I have these in gold as well. These are the mini huggy hoops in sterling silver. This set retails for $59. In fact, each one of these sets retails for $59. These are perfect for layering, or you can wear them alone for a very dainty look. Second up is the Rocks Mini Silver. Again, retails for $59. These are elongated, almost square hoops. They bring a more interesting shape to your earrings, and again, very stackable. They look great with a stud or with the little mini huggy hoops. And the last one is the Mini Abbey Silver. This set retails again for $59 as well. This shape is a bit more elevated than the typical hoop earring. It gives your look a little bit more polish, and it's super easy to wear with both casual and dressed up vibes. Everything right now on the Ana Luisa website is 10% off. Shipping is available worldwide to over 200 countries. Click the link in the description box below to shop analuisa.com. Thank you very much, future me, and also a very special thanks to a lovely viewer who recommended this story. Jennifer Selman, or at JSWoolux on Instagram. She actually sent me a voice message, and she sounded so like excited about this case that I just couldn't resist. So thank you very much for recommending this story. I appreciate you, friend. I hope I do this story justice. So let's get into it. Let's secure the bangs. I don't know why I have to do that with that accent. Around 7:30 p.m. on July 18th, 2018, 20-year-old University of Iowa student Mollie Tibbetts went out for a run near her home in Brooklyn, Iowa, as she did on most days. Brooklyn is a small, very small farm town located about halfway between Des Moines and Cedar Rapids. But anyways, at 10 p.m., Mollie's boyfriend Dalton Jack claims that he received a Snapchat message from Mollie. Just the delivery could have been delayed. You know, if she lived in like the boonies, it takes a while for those signals to go out, you know? So Mollie was actually staying at Dalton's house watching his dogs because he was working out of town in Dubuque, which is like 100 miles away from there. The next morning, he texted Mollie, "Good morning," but he never received a response from her. Now, Mollie also didn't show up for work that day, so her coworkers called and texted her, no response, which was very unlike her, right? So they immediately reached out to Dalton to try to figure out where she was. Very quickly, like immediately after that, Dalton called Mollie's family to see if maybe she was with them. And very soon after that, her family reached out to the police to report her missing. A full-blown search was launched, and a reward of almost $400,000 was offered for information leading to Mollie's safe return. Posters were everywhere. The community banded together to search local farms and do whatever they could do to find her. By July 24th, the FBI and state investigators took over the case, and they called off the local search in the local area. A local farmer named Wayne Chaney later confirmed to news outlets that his property and his home were both searched in the investigation, but nothing was found. Wayne Chaney had a history of stalking and harassment, so he became interesting to police as somebody who might do something like this, you know, based on just his record, but there was no connection made to Mollie. When police searched Mollie's boyfriend's house, Dalton's house, they also came up totally empty-handed, right? There was nothing out of place, no signs of struggle, Nada. Dalton's brother also lived there. The police questioned everybody. They all had rock solid alibis. For once, you know, isn't it always the boyfriend, the husband, the something? Not in this case. Local resident Devin Riley told investigators that he had seen Mollie jogging fairly often, like 3 to 4 times a week. His street just, I guess, was on her regular running route, and once the news hit of a missing jogger, he realized that it was probably her because he hadn't seen her since like July 18th. Mollie always wore her Fitbit tracker, and investigators attempted to use its data to help find her, you know, zeroing in on specific areas of town, especially. Other neighbors along Mollie's running route offered their security camera footage for the police to review in case they could find anything that would help. On July 31st, police say that a man who was being sought for like creeping on joggers, taking the pictures without them knowing, he turned himself in. I mean, he just must have known that he was gonna be an interesting guy because, you know, it's better to turn yourself in, guy, than for them to come looking for you, because he was found to not be connected to the case at all whatsoever. So the days are just going by and they're not finding anything. But Mollie's family seemed to think that the longer that it went on, the longer she was missing, the more likely it would be for them to find her alive. Maybe she was with somebody she knew, but, you know, was in over their head, like some kind of trouble. They were optimistic that Mollie would be found because she had disappeared without a trace. And how could that be? Okay, I need to pause for eyebrows, so I'll be right back. Okay. So, on August 21st, 2018, nearly 5 weeks after Mollie was last seen, her body was discovered. It was concealed in a cornfield about 400 feet back from the road. She had been stabbed upwards of 12 times in the chest, neck, and skull. Her shorts and underwear had been removed and they were found about 30 feet away from where her body was. Her legs had been positioned in a way that would indicate that she had been sexually assaulted. Her body was in a moderate to severe state of decomposition, like partially skeletonized. I said it properly this time, not skeletized. Well, that made it like nearly impossible to gather any kind of DNA that was going to be useful, like DNA that might have been left behind from the killer, and there was nearly no blood present. So later that same day, police announced that a suspect was in custody. He was identified as 24-year-old Christian Baena Rivera. So he had become a person of interest in the case after investigators had reviewed surveillance footage from the neighbors. They noticed in the footage a black Chevy Malibu that was driving like suspiciously back and forth in the area, and it was the area that Mollie had been jogging in. In fact, once all of the available footage had been reviewed and all of the vehicles seen on the camera had been identified, from the time that the runner, Mollie, was briefly seen on camera for like a second, there were 14 vehicles that appeared and 6 of them were that Malibu. Once police were able to link the Malibu to Baena, they closed in. All right, I'm gonna try to get this pronunciation correctly. Don't sue me. Baena was originally from El Guayabillo in Guerrero, Mexico. He arrived in the United States at age 17 illegally. Now, I know that this next part is a very spicy nugget. It's gonna be divisive, but it's just the facts of the case, okay? So it's relevant. After Mollie's body was discovered, campaign materials created by the Donald J. Trump for President Committee decided to capitalize on this story for political purposes. They blamed the Democrats' immigration policies for Mollie's death, and they used it to promote how badly the United States needed this border wall, blah, 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 blah. The Tibbetts family responded. They called it heartless and despicable to use Mollie's death and their grief for political gain. And they denounced those who, quote, appropriate Mollie's soul in advancing views that she believed were profoundly racist. The Tibbetts family did not want Christian Baena Rivera's immigration status blamed in this case. So because this case became quite political, unfortunately, and it was used as a sharp talking point for immigration reform in the United States. So I looked into it, and the Cato Institute published a study in 2015 based on data from Texas, a border state, that clearly shows that native-born residents, United States-born residents, are much more likely to be convicted of violent crime than immigrants of any kind. Another study, a separate study from the American Society of Criminology, showed the same results, when compared with national data, so not just border state data. Now, I'm not defending anything or taking a position, I'm just letting you know what the data says. So once Baena arrived in the United States, he worked undocumented at area farms, most recently for the last 4 years. Rivera worked at Yarrowby Farms in Brooklyn, Iowa under the name John Budd, which is the name that is shown on his out-of-state photo ID and social security card. Yarrowby Farms did not scrutinize the documents provided by Rivera, so their validity was never questioned. And you might squint at that, and you know, I did too for a second, but if you think about it, it's shitty. Just because his name didn't match what he looks like, you know, and because he primarily speaks Spanish, I mean, that's an unfair bias, like it or not. After Baena was arrested and interrogated for upwards of 11 hours, he told authorities that he saw Mollie jogging, running, and he pursued her in his vehicle. He said that Mollie grabbed her phone and said, "You need to leave me alone, I'm gonna call the police." And then, you know, took off running. Then he said he chased her down, a struggle ensued, and then he says that he panicked, got mad, and doesn't remember anything that happened next. A Spanish-speaking police officer, Pamela Romero, is one of the officers who interviewed Baena. In her court testimony, she testified that the interview with Baena was calm and friendly. It was conducted in Spanish. He was given multiple rest and meal breaks. The story that Baena told police over multiple interviews never changed, not one detail, not until he was on the stand in court. He said in the questioning that when he gets really angry, he blacks out. Baena led police to where he left Mollie's body, and he said, "I brought you here, didn't I? So that means I did it. I just don't remember how I did it." All right, so he claims that he blacked out and then he woke up at an intersection in rural Poweshiek County. He looked down and saw that there were like headphone earbud cables on his lap. At that point, he realized that he had put the woman in the trunk of his car. This is his story, okay? Just follow me. He says he then took her out of the trunk of his car and left the body in a cornfield, covering it loosely with corn stalks and leaves. With that confession, Baena was charged with the first-degree murder of Mollie Tibbetts, and he was noted to be a flight risk based on his immigration status. The trial began on May 21st, 2021. So you guys, the ink is barely dry on the court reports. So the state's case focused on the confession from Baena, the police testimony, and the various evidence items that linked him to Mollie's death. Mollie's blood and hair was found in the trunk of Baena's Chevy Malibu. The surveillance footage shows Mollie running, and then the Malibu drives by like seconds later. This guy confessed to the murder, and he took the police out to the location where he left her, so like what else is there to say? The defense though? Yowzers. So the defense described Baena as a hard-working, family-centered immigrant from Mexico who was pressured into making a false confession. They said that the investigation was incomplete and rushed. They tried really hard to raise suspicion about Dalton Jack, questioning his temper, and they brought up infidelity. I mean, they weren't married, so like what do you mean infidelity? But cheated on her. It's shitty, but like that doesn't mean that he murdered her. Anyways, Dalton and his brother had both been working out of town, like far away on the night that Mollie disappeared, so all of that was just pointless. Now here's where it gets really juicy. So on day 6 of the trial, Baena took the stand in his own defense. After describing the circumstances that brought him to coming to the United States and settling in Iowa, eventually working at Yarrowby Farms, he said that he was hired initially without documents and was paid in cash, lived in a trailer on the farm property with 10 other workers. He said when he was hired, they knew what his name was, but once he was able to provide proper documents, wherever those came from, his name became John Budd. Interesting how that works. He sent a lot of his earnings home to support his family back in Mexico. He entered into a relationship with a local young woman named Iris, and they had a young daughter. Oh no, those lashes are... They are in 2 different directions, aren't they? Okay, so then after all that, Baena got down to business. He said that he did not give the police the full story of what happened on July 18th, 2018.
Mollie Tibbetts was in the trunk of your car, isn't that right?
Yes.
and you did not tell them what really happened. Isn't that right?
Correcto. Correct.
In his testimony, he said that his supervisors at work told him that trouble was brewing, probably immigration related. And when he got home from work on July 18th, he says he took a shower, and then when he got out into the living room, there were two masked strangers with weapons. One with a gun, one with a knife. He said they eventually forced him into his car, the black Malibu, telling him where to go. Now, who were the men? Were they immigration people? I don't work for immigration, but I don't think they show up in masks. Just saying. Now, Baena speaks pretty much no English, but he said that he understands a lot of it. Now, these men were English speaking, but from what he heard, they were talking about a person who was running. They drove into town, they saw Mollie Tibbetts running. The men told him to turn the car around. Baena totally admitted that the surveillance footage of his car was his car. He said that he probably drove past Mollie 3 or 4 times at the direction of the men. And the last time that they saw her, one of the men forced him to stop the car, and the man that had the knife got out of the car and ran after Mollie. He was gone for about 10 minutes. When he returned, they directed him to, drive a short distance and then stop the car and give them the keys. The men got out of the car, opened the trunk, put something inside, and then they got back in, and then they directed him to continue driving, drive away. They're driving for some time, in the country, on a country farm road. They approached like a white house. The men told him to turn off of the road between the cornfields and turn off the engine. The men then got out of the car, took his keys and phone, threatened him and his baby mama and child. They forced him out of the car too. Did I leave that out? He said that they forced him out. All of the men are out of the car now. They opened the trunk. There was a body inside. He said it was a woman wearing sports clothing. She was missing one shoe. He said that he put her in the cornfield as she was. He covered her body up so that she wouldn't be exposed in the sun. He left her phone and Fitbit and earbuds that he found inside his trunk on the side of the road. And then he used his phone to get directions to drive back home. Now wait a second. Where are the men? Didn't he say that the 2 men took his phone? Did they open the trunk and then just disappear? How did Mollie's shorts and underwear end up 30 feet away from her when her body was discovered if he took her out of the trunk and put her in the cornfield as he had found her? In the state's cross-examination, the prosecution asked the same thing. He said that he found his phone and keys in the trunk and that the 2 men just disappeared. They just ran off.
Sure, Jan.
When asked why he didn't immediately go to the police, he said that he was afraid. He knew that if he said anything that he'd be in trouble for being involved. And he was also afraid that the men would hurt his family. Baena also testified that during his 11-hour interrogation, the police began with common questions, where he's from, where does he work, his regular routine, and then as the interview progressed, the police were accusing him of various things, showing him photographs, all the things you would expect in an interrogation, right? But he says the police coerced that confession. I watched this trial. I watched every second of it, and I gotta tell you, I think this guy's full of shit. If you're asking Detective Sara, I think he was creeping around town. He saw Mollie jogging, he approached her, she refused, he overpowered her, likely knocked her out or something. And then I think he stuffed her in his trunk and took her out to the cornfields where he assaulted her and stabbed her, explaining why there wasn't more of Mollie's blood in his trunk. And then I think he left her there to rot in the sun. Well, on May 28th, 2021, the jury in the trial returned a guilty verdict.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Christian Bahena Rivera, guilty of the crime of murder in the first degree.
Well, that's great. That's great, right? Hold on to your butts. Before the sentencing phase could begin, and because he was found guilty of such a crime, Baena was expected to be sentenced to life in prison, the defense filed a flurry of motions regarding new evidence.
Mollie Tibbetts was abducted for the purposes of sex trafficking.
Attorneys for Christian Bahena Rivera say 2 new witnesses claim a man confessed to killing Mollie Tibbetts after she was abducted and held for sex trafficking.
On July 8th, 2021, a motion for a new trial was filed by Baena's defense, including motions to turn over any evidence that might help exonerate him and grant a new trial. So in the subsequent hearing, a Poweshiek County Sheriff's deputy testified regarding a complaint that was received by a man named Scott Carter. Scott Carter is a registered sex offender. He complained that he was being harassed by his neighbor. He claimed that his neighbor was close friends with somebody in the Mexican mafia and had also reported to someone else that they had seen Mollie Tibbetts in a trap house. Buckle up. Okay, the defense for Baena had claimed that 2 people had come forward toward the end of the trial with claims that somebody else had confessed to killing Mollie Tibbetts. So everything stopped and the court held a special hearing that could potentially change everything. So the first witness at the hearing was Arnie Mackey, a 46-year-old man incarcerated for domestic violence. So Arnie had approached officials at Mount Pleasant Correctional Facility on May 26, 2021, after hearing Baena's testimony on the news. He claimed that he had information that supported Baena's account. Mackey said that when he was in the Keokuk, that's hard to say, Keokuk County Jail, another inmate named Gavin Jones confessed to him that he had killed Mollie Tibbetts. Jones said that he saw Mollie Tibbetts being held captive, bound and gagged at a trap house. And he had been forced by the owner of this house, his name was James Lowe. Allegedly, James Lowe's trap house was used for sex trafficking. So Mollie Tibbetts was kidnapped for the purpose of trafficking her. But when the search for her got too much attention, the case was too big, Lowe told James to eliminate the threat. Gavin Jones allegedly stabbed Mollie to death, put her body in a tarp, and then proceeded to set up Christian Baena Rivera. So a second witness named Lindsay Voss allegedly came forward just hours after Arnie Mackey. Lindsay Voss was Gavin Jones's former girlfriend, and she told investigators that Jones had also told her that he had raped and murdered Mollie Tibbetts. Gavin Jones has not been charged with any crimes related to Mollie Tibbetts' death, and James Lowe, the trap house owner, was apparently investigated but never charged regarding sexual assault or kidnapping. The reports of the sex trafficking investigation were allegedly not provided to the defense counsel, which they claim to be a Brady violation. So a Brady violation occurs when the prosecution hides or fails to disclose any evidence that's favorable to the defense. And this hearing was held to consider introducing this evidence. As interesting as this turn of events is, it doesn't make sense to me. Mollie was missing for like 5 weeks before they found her skeleton in a cornfield. Maybe she could have been kidnapped and held at the trap house, but if Baena was set up, why was his car seen on the surveillance footage seconds after seeing Mollie jogging the day she disappeared? Baena said in his testimony that the 2 strange men that forced him to drive around Brooklyn, Iowa, targeted Mollie, and he saw her dead body that day. I am Confucian.
America, explain!
Now, in that testimony from Arnie Mackey, he seems totally sincere to me. He said that he had heard the confession about a year earlier, but he didn't say anything because he didn't believe it at first, and it wasn't until he saw some news clips that it made him rethink it. And he had nothing to gain, and it was corroborated by more than one person.
What's the culture like in prison for people who come forward and testify in open court?
I have no idea.
Is it good?
Probably not, but I'd rather do the right thing.
But the timeline just doesn't add up for me. You gotta hand it to that legal defense. Okay, they were doing some Olympic level legal gymnastics. The court ultimately denied the motion to consider the new evidence, this sex trafficking connection, on the basis that it was procedurally improper and there was just a total lack of evidence to link the case to any of that evidence. On August 2nd, 2021, Judge Joel Yates dismissed the claim that the new evidence implicated other suspects, and he denied the motion for the new trial. The sentencing phase of the trial resumed on my birthday, August 30th. Judge Joel Yates sentenced Christian Baena Rivera to life without the possibility of parole. Baena's defense team immediately filed an appeal, which you would expect. Now, after Mollie Tibbetts' death, running communities adopted the hashtag Miles for Mollie, to dedicate their miles ran to Mollie and to acknowledge the dangers that women, I mean all people, but especially women, face when they're out running alone. I'm a runner myself. I mean, it's mostly me just lumbering along slowly and gasping. But still, the idea that women can't be out running alone without carrying pepper spray or like a weapon or only run with a buddy is just, it's just really fucked up. Don't get me wrong, I use the tools, you know, I track my runs, I let people know when I'm going out, but I just hate that it's something that exists. That is the infuriating and tragic story of Mollie Tibbetts. As a person who enjoys running, this one just pisses me off, you know? I'm glad that justice has been served and the Tibbetts family does have closure, which is a rare thing in cases like this, unfortunately. Thank you again to our sponsor, Ana Luisa. Be sure to check down in the description box for the link to go shopping. It's right on top to make it very easy for you. There's something for every style, for every budget, and I've also linked the styles that I have featured in the video today. If you were curious about any of the makeup that I used in today's look, just check down in the description box. Everything is linked. Thank you so much for hanging out today and for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you want to see more videos like this one, then consider subscribing to this channel before you leave today. I upload new videos here on YouTube every week, and you can follow me on most of the other socials as well. That is it for now. I will catch you next time in the next video. Bye! Is this the same look that I did in the last video? Too many fucking brushes. My ears get so red when I touch them. Ugh. Local resident. Oh, fuck. Hypoallergenic. Why do I do this to myself? I'm never ready. Today's episode of Crue... September is Excuse me.